Nearly midnight when Lena finally stepped outside the small diner where she worked. The streets were quiet. Cold wind blew across the empty road. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and sighed in exhaustion. Another 14-hour shift. Another day trying to survive. Just as she was about to walk home, she noticed something strange across the street. A man was stumbling through the rain. He looked disoriented, weak. Then suddenly, he collapsed, hard, right onto the wet pavement. Lena froze. Her first instinct was to keep walking. The city was dangerous at night, but something inside her refused to ignore it. She rushed toward him. The man was unconscious. Blood slowly spread through his expensive white shirt. Lena gasped. This man is badly hurt. Then his eyes opened slightly. He grabbed her wrist weakly. His voice was barely a whisper. "Don't. Call the police." Then he passed out again. Lena stared at him, a wounded stranger, in the middle of the night. And somehow, her life was about to change forever. Lena struggled to drag the man into a taxi. The driver looked nervous. "Lady, this looks like trouble," Lena replied firmly. "I'll handle the trouble. Just drive." Soon they arrived at her tiny apartment. It was simple. Old furniture, small kitchen, nothing luxurious. But it was home. She carefully cleaned the man's wound and wrapped his shoulder with bandages. Hours passed. Finally, the stranger slowly opened his eyes. He looked around the unfamiliar room, then at Lena. "Where am I?" Lena crossed her arms. "My apartment?" The man blinked, confused. "Why would you bring a stranger here?" Lena shrugged casually. "Because you were bleeding on the street." She handed him a glass of water. "And you looked like someone who really didn't want the police." The man studied her carefully, then said quietly, "My name is Daniel." But what Lena didn't know, Daniel was not just any stranger. The next morning, Daniel woke up alone. Sunlight filled the small apartment. Lena had already left for work. On the table was a note. "Breakfast in the fridge. Don't bleed on the couch again." Daniel actually laughed softly. It had been years since anyone spoke to him like that. His phone vibrated. He answered. A panicked voice spoke immediately. "Sir, the entire city is searching for you." Daniel stood by the window calmly. "I'm fine." "Sir, the board members are worried." Daniel looked around Lena's modest apartment. "I'm not ready to come back yet." He hung up. Outside, his security teams were still searching. But Daniel Hayes, one of the richest men in the country, had decided to disappear. For now. When Lena returned home that evening, Daniel was sitting quietly on the couch. "Feeling better?" she asked. He nodded. "You should rest." She went to the kitchen and started cooking noodles. Daniel watched her. No servants, no luxury, no assistants, just a woman working hard. "Why do you help strangers?" he asked. Lena laughed. "Because life would be miserable if nobody helped each other." Daniel was silent. In his world, people helped only when there was something to gain. But Lena expected nothing, and that intrigued him. Over the next few days, Daniel stayed longer than expected. His wound slowly healed. In the evenings, they talked. Lena told him stories about working 2 jobs, about taking care of her sick mother, about dreaming of opening a small cafe someday. Daniel listened quietly. One night, Lena accidentally burned dinner. Smoke filled the apartment. Daniel laughed, a deep, genuine laugh. Lena stared. "Wow, the mysterious stranger can smile," Daniel replied softly. "Only when the cook almost burns the building down." They both laughed, and something began to grow between them, something neither expected. Late one night, Daniel quietly stepped outside Lena's apartment. The street was empty. He pulled out his phone and made a call. The moment the person answered, his tone changed completely. Serious. Cold. Commanding. "Yes," a nervous voice replied immediately. "Sir, we have been searching everywhere for you." Daniel leaned against the wall calmly. "I told you to stop the search." "Sir, the board members are demanding answers. The investors are panicking." Daniel looked up toward Lena's apartment window. The warm light from inside spilled onto the quiet street. Inside that small apartment was a world completely different from his. No pressure, no greed, no expectations. Just peace. Daniel spoke slowly. "I will return when I decide to." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, your enemies may still be looking for you." Daniel replied calmly. "Let them." He ended the call. For the first time in many years, Daniel Hayes, one of the most powerful billionaires in the city, had found something far more valuable than money. A place where he could simply exist without being watched. A few days later, a heavy rainstorm hit the city. Thunder echoed outside Lena's small apartment. Suddenly, the lights went out. The entire apartment went dark. "Great," Lena sighed. She searched through a drawer and found a candle. When she lit it, the small room filled with a soft, golden glow. Daniel sat on the couch, watching her quietly. They both laughed when the wind nearly blew the candle out. Finally, they sat down together near the window. Outside, the rain tapped gently against the glass. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Daniel looked at Lena, really looked at her. "You know," he said quietly, "you're stronger than you realize." Lena smiled softly. "And you're stranger than you realize." Daniel chuckled. Their eyes met. Neither of them looked away. The moment grew quiet, almost electric. For a second, it felt like the entire world had stopped moving. Daniel slowly leaned closer. But suddenly, Lena stood up quickly. "Okay, that's enough emotional conversation for tonight," she said nervously. Daniel smiled. But deep down, he knew something had changed. He was no longer just a guest in her home, and she was no longer just a stranger in his life. Several days later, Daniel stood near the door of Lena's apartment. His wound had healed. His bag was packed. Lena leaned against the wall, pretending to look relaxed. "So, I guess this is the part where the mysterious stranger disappears," she said. Daniel looked at her quietly. "It's time for me to go." She nodded slowly. "You should probably return to wherever mysterious strangers come from." Daniel smiled slightly. "You saved my life." Lena shrugged. "You would have done the same." But they both knew that probably wasn't true. Daniel stepped outside. Down the street, a black luxury car was waiting. Lena watched him walk away. The door closed behind him, and suddenly the apartment felt much quieter than before, much emptier. For the first time since he arrived, Lena realized something. She was going to miss him. The next morning, Lena arrived at the diner for work. But something unusual was happening. Every employee was gathered around the television. "Breaking news," the reporter said. "Billionaire CEO Daniel Hayes has reappeared after mysteriously disappearing several days ago." Lena froze. Slowly, she turned toward the television. And there he was. Daniel. But he didn't look like the man who slept on her couch. Now he was dressed in an expensive suit. Security guards surrounded him. Reporters pushed forward, asking questions. The screen displayed his name clearly. Daniel Hayes, CEO Billionaire, owner of one of the largest companies in the country. Lena dropped the tray she was holding. It crashed loudly on the floor. Her coworker looked shocked. "Wait, you know who that is?" Lena stared at the television screen. Her voice barely came out. Daniel? That same night, Lena heard a knock on her apartment door. She opened it and froze. Daniel stood there. But everything was different now. Behind him, several black luxury cars lined the street. 2 security guards stood nearby. The quiet, mysterious man she knew had suddenly become the powerful billionaire the world recognized. Lena looked hurt. You lied to me. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, but not about everything. She crossed her arms. So, what was all of this? A game? Daniel stepped inside the apartment slowly. No. His voice softened. It was a test. Lena frowned. A test? Daniel looked directly into her eyes. In my world, people pretend to be kind because they know who I am. He gestured around her small apartment. But you didn't know. You helped me without expecting anything. Lena's voice trembled slightly. So I was just part of your experiment? Daniel shook his head gently. No. He paused, then spoke the truth he had been hiding. I came here to test your heart. His voice grew softer. But somewhere along the way, I realized I was the one being tested. The room became very quiet after Daniel's confession. Lena looked at him with disbelief. You tested me? She asked slowly. Daniel did not look away. Yes. Lena shook her head and laughed bitterly. Of course. I should have known. She walked toward the window, trying to calm herself. All those conversations, all those dinners. Her voice cracked slightly. I thought they were real. Daniel stepped closer. They were real. Lena turned sharply. No, Daniel, they weren't. You knew everything about me, but I knew nothing about you. Daniel lowered his voice. I wanted to see the real you. Lena replied immediately. Well, congratulations. You found her. She crossed her arms. But you should go back to your billionaire life now, because people like me don't belong in it. Daniel stood still for a moment. Then he spoke quietly. You think I came here because I was bored? Lena didn't answer. Daniel continued. The night you found me, I had just been attacked. Lena looked back at him. What? My business rivals wanted me gone. They tried to kill me. Lena's expression changed. But when I woke up in your apartment, Daniel looked around the small room. I realized something. In your world, nobody cared about my money. Nobody cared about my power. You just cared that I was hurt. He met her eyes again. That's something I haven't experienced in years. Lena was silent. The anger in her eyes slowly softened, but the hurt was still there. Daniel reached into his pocket and placed a small card on the table. My company owns several restaurants in this city, he said. You once told me you wanted to open a cafe. Lena looked at the card, but didn't touch it. Daniel continued. I can make that happen. I can give you the funding. I can give you the location. Lena slowly pushed the card back toward him. I didn't help you because I wanted something. Daniel nodded. I know. That's exactly why you deserve it. Lena shook her head. No. Daniel looked surprised. I don't want your money. I just wanted honesty. For the first time, Daniel looked unsure of himself. He had never met someone who refused everything he could offer. Suddenly, Daniel's phone rang. He answered immediately. His expression changed. Serious. Dangerous. What happened? He asked. A voice on the phone spoke urgently. Sir, we've located the men who attacked you. They're moving tonight. Daniel's eyes hardened. Where? He listened carefully, then ended the call. Lena looked worried. What's wrong? Daniel hesitated. The people who attacked me. They might come here. Lena's eyes widened. To my apartment? Daniel nodded. They know I disappeared. And if they discover where I've been hiding? The room fell silent. For the first time, Lena realized something frightening. Her quiet life had suddenly become very dangerous. Daniel walked toward the door quickly. You need to leave, he said. Go stay with a friend tonight. Lena frowned. What about you? Daniel picked up his phone. I'll handle it. Lena stepped closer. You're injured. Daniel smiled faintly. I've handled worse. Lena watched him carefully, then said something unexpected. I'm not leaving. Daniel looked shocked. Lena, this is serious. I know. She crossed her arms stubbornly. You brought this trouble into my apartment. So now we deal with it together. Daniel stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed quietly, even in danger. She was still the same fearless woman who dragged a wounded stranger out of the rain. And at that moment, Daniel realized something important. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was falling in love with her. The night grew darker. Rain began to fall again outside Lena's apartment building. Daniel stood near the window, watching the street carefully. Lena could feel the tension in the room. Are you sure they will come here? She asked quietly. Daniel nodded slowly. They're desperate. And desperate people make dangerous decisions. Suddenly, headlights appeared outside the building. A black van slowly stopped near the entrance. Daniel's expression changed immediately. That's them. Lena's heart started beating faster. 2 men stepped out of the van. They looked around the street carefully. One of them pointed toward Lena's apartment building. Daniel spoke calmly but firmly. Lena, go to the bedroom and lock the door. She shook her head. No. Lena, this isn't a debate. But she refused to move. Instead, she whispered, You said they came because of you. Daniel nodded. Then I'm not hiding while you face them alone. For a moment, Daniel just stared at her. Even now, when danger was standing outside the door. She refused to run. And somehow, that made him admire her even more. A loud knock suddenly hit the apartment door, then another and another. The men outside were getting impatient. Daniel stepped closer to Lena. Stay behind me, he whispered. The knocking turned into pounding. Finally, a voice shouted from outside. We know you're in there, Daniel. Lena's eyes widened. Daniel opened the door slowly. 2 men stood in the hallway, cold expressions, dangerous eyes. One of them laughed. Well, look who finally decided to show himself. Daniel's voice was calm. You should have stayed away. The man smirked. Your company is worth billions. You think we're walking away empty-handed? The second man suddenly noticed Lena standing behind Daniel. Well, this is interesting. Daniel immediately stepped forward, blocking their view. Leave her out of this. The first man laughed again. Too late for that. The tension in the hallway grew thicker. The men stepped closer, but Lena suddenly spoke. Stop. Everyone turned toward her. Her voice was steady. If you're here for money, take it from him. She pointed at Daniel. But leave. The men laughed. Oh, sweetheart, it's not that simple. But Lena didn't move. She stood beside Daniel, not behind him. Beside him. Daniel glanced at her. For the first time in years, someone had chosen to stand with him instead of hiding behind his power. That moment meant more to him than she realized. Sirens suddenly echoed in the distance. Police cars were approaching the street. The attackers cursed. "You called the police?" one of them growled. Daniel smirked slightly. "I didn't." Both men looked confused. Then Lena spoke quietly. "I did." The men panicked. "Let's go." They ran down the hallway and disappeared down the stairs. The danger was finally gone. Minutes later, the police cars arrived outside the building. Daniel and Lena stood in the quiet apartment again. Everything felt strangely calm now. Daniel looked at her. "You could have been hurt." Lena shrugged softly. "So could you." Daniel stepped closer. "You don't even know me that well." Lena smiled gently. "I know enough." He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Lena answered honestly. "I know you're not the man people see on television. You're the man who laughed when I burned dinner. You're the man who helped me wash dishes. And you're the man who stayed when you didn't have to." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. For the first time in years, someone saw him as more than just a billionaire. The next morning, sunlight filled Lena's apartment. The storm had passed. Daniel stood by the window, watching the city slowly wake up. Lena walked into the room with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. "So, what happens now?" she asked. Daniel looked at her quietly. "In my world, things will go back to normal. Meetings, investors, endless pressure." Lena nodded. "And my world goes back to double shifts at the diner." Daniel smiled slightly. But then he said something unexpected. "What if our worlds didn't have to stay separate?" Lena looked confused. Daniel reached into his pocket and placed the same card on the table again. But this time he pushed it gently toward her. "Open your cafe," he said. Lena started to protest, but Daniel stopped her. "Not as a favor, as a partnership." She raised an eyebrow. "A partnership?" Daniel nodded. "You run the cafe, and I'll be the first customer every morning." Lena laughed softly. "That sounds suspiciously like a date." Daniel smiled. "Maybe it is." She thought about it for a moment, then finally said, "Okay." Daniel looked relieved. "For the cafe?" Lena shook her head with a playful smile. "No." "For the date." Outside the window, the city continued its busy life. But inside that small apartment, 2 completely different worlds had finally found a way to meet.